The 1960s weren't just about peace and love. Behind the glitz of Hollywood lurked some of the most unhinged personalities to ever grace the silver screen. While America's living rooms portrayed these stars as glamorous icons, the reality was far more disturbing. From drinking bodily fluids to violent outbursts on set, these celebrities pushed boundaries that would shock even today's standards. Their bizarre behaviors were carefully hidden by powerful studios, but the truth was far stranger than any film they starred in. Let's dive straight into it. Klaus Kinski wasn't just eccentric, he was genuinely dangerous. The volatile German actor terrorized film sets throughout the 1960s with explosive rage that frequently turned physical. During one infamous incident, his behavior became so unhinged that the local indigenous tribe approached director Werner Herzog with an offer to kill Kinski. Herzog declined, though he later admitted he'd considered it himself. Kinski's instability wasn't limited to film sets. He once shot a gun at a noisy neighbor, barely missing the startled man. What made Kinski remarkable was his twisted genius. He could channel his instability into mesmerizing performances. His autobiography contained claims so outlandish that Herzog called it the most hideous example of pure fiction, revealing a mind that couldn't distinguish between reality and fantasy. But even Kinski's explosive personality pales compared to our next subject, an acclaimed actress whose health regimen would make even the most dedicated wellness guru gag. Sarah Miles earned an Oscar nomination for Ryan's Daughter, but it's her bizarre personal habits that left Hollywood speechless. For over 4 decades, Miles practiced what might be the strangest health routine in history, drinking her own urine daily, claiming it cured her allergies. Her eccentricity didn't stop there. After her beloved dog passed away, Miles had it taxidermied and kept it in her bed, sleeping beside her stuffed pet for years. She also embraced the supernatural with startling enthusiasm, investigating crop circles and claiming frequent paranormal experiences. Her dramatic temperament was legendary on film sets. She could transform from charming to tempestuous in seconds, throwing objects when displeased. What's truly astonishing about Miles wasn't just her eccentricity, but how openly she flaunted it in an era when stars carefully guarded their public images. Speaking of shocking behavior that defied Hollywood norms, few stars rebelled against their squeaky clean image more dramatically than our next subject. Tuesday Weld wasn't just ahead of her time, she was living in a different dimension altogether. At just 16, she bought her own house and moved out, declaring independence from her controlling mother and the studio system. Her dating history shocked even the most jaded industry veterans. At 15, Weld began a relationship with actor John Ireland, who was 44 at the time, creating such a scandal that studio heads intervened. Weld's impulsive behavior became legendary. During one incident at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, she caused a commotion when security wouldn't let her up to Elvis Presley's room. After gaining entry, witnesses described her prancing around the room like an angry little cat, unleashing profanity that shocked even Presley's hardened entourage. Her unpredictability extended to her career choices. Despite being offered lead roles in films that became classics, Lolita, Bonnie and Clyde, and True Grit, Weld turned them all down. When asked why she rejected stardom, she famously quipped, "I think it was a Buick." Yet Weld's wild behavior seems almost tame compared to the legendary drinking exploits of our next subject. Richard Harris elevated drinking to an art form that both enhanced and nearly destroyed his career. During the filming of Camelot, his consumption reached such proportions that crew members placed bets on whether he'd remain conscious through each day's shooting. He frequently arrived on set still intoxicated from the previous night, yet somehow delivered powerful performances. Harris's hotel rooms bore the brunt of his wild behavior. In one infamous incident, he completely destroyed a suite after a 3-day bender, ripping fixtures from walls and throwing furniture through windows. When presented with the bill, he simply asked if he could purchase the room since he'd already taken most of it home anyway. His drinking companions were equally legendary. Harris, Peter O'Toole, and Richard Burton formed what became known as the Unholy Trinity, a group whose alcohol consumption reached mythic proportions. What made Harris fascinating wasn't just his excessive behavior, but the contrast between his theatrical background and his wild exploits. But while Harris's demons were largely self-inflicted, our next subject had a very different reputation. Shelley Winters transformed from Hollywood bombshell to eccentric character actress with behavior so unpredictable that directors created special protocols for handling her. During the Poseidon adventure, Winters became convinced that producer Irwin Allen was trying to drown her during underwater sequences. Her response? She confronted him on set, hurling waterlogged clothing at him before launching into a tirade that left the entire crew frozen in shock. Winters' personal life was equally chaotic. She claimed intimate relationships with numerous Hollywood legends and provided such explicit details that interviewers would quickly change the subject, unprepared for her candor. Her homes became physical manifestations of her cluttered mind. Visitors described entering spaces so filled with collected items that navigating from room to room required following narrow pathways through the accumulation. She refused to discard anything, claiming each item held spiritual energy she couldn't part with. But while Winters' eccentricities were largely self-directed, our next subject endured psychological torment that turned her promising career into a notorious Hollywood horror story. Tippi Hedren's experience with Alfred Hitchcock transformed her from an aspiring actress into the victim of one of Hollywood's most disturbing obsessions. Hitchcock had her followed by crew members who reported her movements back to him. He demanded control over her wardrobe both on and off set, and forbade other directors from casting her, effectively imprisoning her career when she refused his advances. The filming of The Birds became psychological warfare. In the infamous attic scene, Hitchcock told Hedren they would use mechanical birds. Instead, she endured 5 days of having live birds thrown at her face and attached to her clothing with elastic bands. One bird nearly pecked her eye, causing a breakdown that halted production. Even more disturbing was Hedren's experience filming Marnie. Hitchcock installed a door connecting his office directly to her dressing room. She reported finding him staring at her silently when she returned from filming, creating an atmosphere of constant surveillance and dread. But while Hedren's eccentricity was largely forced upon her, our next subject willingly embraced increasingly strange behavior. Jerry Lewis wasn't just a comedian, he was a control freak whose bizarre behavior escalated throughout the 1960s. Lewis's perfectionism reached pathological levels. He installed multiple camera monitors on his sets, watching every department's movements simultaneously. If a crew member so much as yawned, Lewis would halt production, publicly humiliate them, and sometimes fire them on the spot. His personal habits became increasingly strange. Lewis traveled with a customized refrigerator containing exactly 24 identical ham sandwiches prepared according to his precise specifications. If the sandwiches weren't arranged in perfect rows, he would refuse to eat anything all day, then blame any failed scenes on his forced starvation. As the 1960s progressed, Lewis's comedy became increasingly experimental and bizarre. His unreleased film, The Day the Clown Cried, about a circus performer entertaining children in a concentration camp, became legendary for its disturbing concept. But Lewis's controlled chaos pales in comparison to the genuine counterculture rebellion of our next subject. Peter Fonda wasn't just acting when he portrayed the countercultural icon in Easy Rider, he was essentially playing himself. Fonda's drug experimentation wasn't casual, it was methodical and extreme. He claimed to have taken LSD over 200 times, including a famous session with the Beatles that allegedly inspired their song, She Said, She Said. The shadow of his famous father, Henry Fonda, created a psychological burden that manifested in bizarre ways. Peter would sometimes introduce himself using his father's name at parties, then behave outrageously, later explaining he was liberating Henry from his reputation. During the filming of Easy Rider, Fonda's erratic behavior created genuine concern. He insisted on using real drugs during filming, leading to scenes where his reactions weren't acting but genuine intoxication. Director Dennis Hopper, himself no stranger to excess, reportedly had to restrain Fonda during a particularly intense acid trip that nearly derailed the production. Speaking of authentic rebels, few embodied the self-destructive spirit of 1960s excess more completely than our next subject. Dennis Hopper didn't just flirt with insanity in the 1960s, he had a full-blown relationship with it. His substance abuse reached levels so extreme that even in an era known for excess, Hopper stood out as particularly unhinged. By his own admission, Hopper's daily consumption during the Easy Rider era included half a gallon of rum with a fifth of rum on the side, as backup, 28 beers, and 3 grams of cocaine. This wasn't weekend partying, this was his standard daily intake. The cocaine, he explained, was necessary just to keep him conscious enough to continue drinking. His paranoia became legendary on film sets. During one production, Hopper barricaded himself in his trailer for 3 days, emerging only after the crew created an elaborate ritual to cleanse the equipment of negative energy. Another time, while high on LSD, he mistook a tree for a grizzly bear and shot at it repeatedly before running naked through the woods. But while Hopper's excess was spectacular, he wasn't alone in the hedonistic exploration of 1960s Hollywood. Before Jack Nicholson became a Hollywood icon, he was building a reputation in the 1960s as one of the industry's most authentically unusual characters. Nicholson's living arrangements raised eyebrows even in bohemian circles. He transformed his home into what visitors described as a 24-hour party zone, where boundaries between guests, residents, and intruders became meaningless. At one point, over a dozen people were living in the property without Nicholson ever being entirely clear on who they were. His approach to auditions became legendary for their unpredictability. For one role, Nicholson arrived completely naked except for a necktie, claiming he wanted to remove all barriers between character and interpretation. Nicholson's personal habits were equally unconventional. He insisted on sleeping in a custom-built pyramid structure he claimed concentrated cosmic energy, resulting in fewer required hours of sleep. But Nicholson's subtle eccentricities seem almost mundane compared to our next subject. Jayne Mansfield didn't just embrace excess, she turned it into an art form. As her film career began declining in the 1960s, her publicity stunts and outrageous behavior became increasingly desperate and bizarre. Mansfield's famous Pink Palace mansion was less a home than a physical manifestation of her over-the-top personality. The heart-shaped swimming pool was just the beginning. Inside, visitors found heart-shaped bathtubs, heart-shaped ceiling decorations, and even a heart-shaped toilet. The entire property was painted in shocking pink, with pink shag carpets so thick guests reported swimming through them. Her publicity stunts reached new levels of outlandishness. Mansfield would accidentally expose her breasts at carefully planned public events, with photographers mysteriously always positioned perfectly to capture these wardrobe malfunctions. As the 1960s progressed, Mansfield began associating with Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, participating in rituals that shocked even Hollywood's most jaded observers. While Mansfield's eccentricity manifested as external spectacle, our next subject's strange behavior emerged from a much more complex internal landscape. Peter Sellers wasn't just playing different characters on screen, he seemed to be different people entirely depending on the day. Sellers famously claimed he had no personality of his own. "I'm a blank page," he once told a startled interviewer. "When I'm not playing a role, I don't exist." This wasn't false modesty, it was a disturbing insight into a man who seemed genuinely lost when the cameras stopped rolling. His obsession with maintaining characters extended far beyond professional requirements. While filming Dr. Strangelove, Sellers refused to break character even during medical emergencies. After suffering heart palpitations on set, he was attended by paramedics while insisting on speaking in his character's German accent, claiming his actual voice might trigger a full cardiac arrest. Sellers' spiritual beliefs became increasingly bizarre throughout the 1960s. He consulted psychics daily, making major career decisions based on their readings. When one spiritual advisor told him purple was death energy, Sellers removed every purple item from his homes and would leave restaurants if served food on purple plates. But while Sellers' instability remained largely contained to his personal relationships, our next subject's controlling behavior became the stuff of Hollywood legend. Joan Crawford's eccentricities weren't just quirks, they were weapons she wielded to control everyone in her orbit. Crawford's cleaning obsession reached pathological levels. Visitors to her home were often greeted by the sight of the aging star on her hands and knees, scrubbing floors, despite employing full-time housekeepers. If she spotted a speck of dust, she would fly into a rage that could last for hours. Her personal hygiene rituals bordered on self-harm. Crawford would take scalding hot showers, followed by rubbing alcohol baths, a painful process she repeated multiple times daily. Crawford's need for control extended to guests who received detailed instruction manuals before visits. These manifestos specified everything from how to fold toilet paper to which direction to face while sleeping in her guest beds. Perhaps most notorious was Crawford's relationship with wire hangers. The mommy dearest portrayal of her screaming about these forbidden items wasn't exaggeration. Multiple household employees confirmed that finding wire hangers in closets would trigger explosive episodes that terrified everyone in the household. But while Crawford's eccentricities intensified in private, Our next subject's controversial behavior became increasingly public. Charlie Chaplin may have created the lovable little tramp, but by the 1960s, his personal behavior had long since alienated him from American audiences. Chaplin's romantic fixation on extremely young women continued even into his 70s. His marriage to 18-year-old Una O'Neill when he was 54 was just the most public example of his disturbing pattern. His political behavior became increasingly erratic. Having been exiled from America during the McCarthy era, Chaplin developed elaborate conspiracy theories about government persecution. He would sometimes refuse to speak English for days, claiming American spies were monitoring his conversations through fillings in his teeth. Chaplin's controlling behavior on set hadn't mellowed with age. During the filming of A Countess from Hong Kong in 1966, he reduced Sophia Loren to tears with his obsessive demands for minute physical adjustments. When she protested, he demonstrated the movements himself, including intimate scenes despite being 77 years old at the time. But while Chaplin's eccentricities emerged from complex psychological issues, our next subject's outrageous behavior was a deliberate rebellion against conservative values. Brigitte Bardot didn't just push boundaries in the 1960s, she obliterated them with behavior so scandalous it created diplomatic incidents. Bardot's approach to clothing was revolutionary even by 1960s standards. At a formal diplomatic reception in 1967, she arrived wearing nothing but a loosely draped fur coat. When the French president whispered a request for her to be more discreet, she allegedly dropped the coat entirely before being quickly escorted out. Her romantic life generated constant scandals. Bardot would publicly announce new relationships before ending previous ones, creating overlapping affairs that she documented in explicit detail to shocked journalists. When criticized for her behavior, she famously responded, "I'm not breaking hearts, I'm liberating them from outdated ownership." Bardot's film sets became notorious for unpredictability. She would refuse to perform scripted scenes that didn't interest her, instead improvising alternatives that often involved less clothing and more provocative behavior than censors would allow. But while Bardot's rebellion was largely external, our next subject's eccentric behavior emerged from one of cinema's most complex minds. Marlon Brando's eccentricities weren't just acts of rebellion, they were manifestations of one of Hollywood's most brilliantly unusual minds. Brando's method acting reached extremes that disturbed even dedicated professionals. During the filming of Mutiny on the Bounty, he would remain in character continuously, forcing crew members to address him as captain and requiring elaborate naval protocols be observed even when cameras weren't rolling. His home became a sanctuary for exotic animals, including an anteater named Chuck that he would take for walks on a leash through Beverly Hills. Visitors reported finding monkeys freely roaming his house, occasionally wearing custom-made clothing that Brando had commissioned from Hollywood costume designers. Perhaps most disturbing was Brando's relationship with death. After his close friend Wally Cox died, Brando kept his ashes and would regularly have conversations with them as if Cox were still alive. He told concerned friends that Cox's spirit would communicate career advice, which Brando followed despite the often self-sabotaging nature of these recommendations. Our final subject took celebrity excess to heights that even shocked the jaded Hollywood community. Elizabeth Taylor didn't just enjoy luxury, she weaponized extravagance as a form of self-expression. Taylor's jewelry collection became legendary not just for its value, but for how she obtained it. Richard Burton's lavish gifts, including the famous 69-carat diamond, weren't just expressions of affection, but carefully orchestrated public spectacles. Taylor would accidentally display new acquisitions at events guaranteed to generate maximum publicity. Her consumption of alcohol and prescription medications reached concerning levels. During filming of Cleopatra, production was delayed for weeks because Taylor was frequently too intoxicated to work. Rather than concealing these issues, she seemed to incorporate them into her public persona, once telling a reporter, "If I'm going to be a mess, I might as well be a magnificent mess." Perhaps most outrageous was Taylor's approach to marriage. With 8 ceremonies to 7 husbands, she married Richard Burton twice. Taylor treated matrimony as temporary entertainment rather than lifetime commitment. She once famously quipped that she only felt comfortable in a relationship when I have a ring and a man and a wedding dress, suggesting the spectacle itself was her primary motivation. The stars of 1960s Hollywood weren't just famous, they were living experiments in how far human behavior could deviate from normal while still being celebrated. Their excesses, quirks, and outright madness didn't happen despite their fame, but because of it, flourishing in an environment where ordinary rules didn't apply. What's most fascinating isn't just how bizarre these celebrities became, but how their eccentricities reflected deeper truths about both human psychology and American culture during a decade of profound transformation. Behind every strange behavior was a person navigating unprecedented fame in an era of rapidly shifting values. The line between genius and madness has always been thin, but nowhere was it more permeable than in 1960s Hollywood. These 17 remarkable personalities remind us that creativity often emerges from minds that experience reality differently from the rest of us, for better and sometimes for worse. Which of these Hollywood eccentrics fascinated you most? Let us know in the comments below.